Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Fletcher, and I'm the chair of the Environmental Action Group here at First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to another evening of Earth Speaks, recently awarded Earth Speaks. I'll go over some details about the presentation that we're having tonight. It will go on for about the first 40 minutes. At around 7:40, there'll be questions that I'll moderate. And at 8 o'clock, the recording, which is running now, will be shut off, and we'll just have a run-out session of just informal chat and questions. So tonight's topic is developing a healing forest in your community. The National Healing Forest Initiative has supported the creation of forests of all sizes, even green patches in a garden, as places where survivors and families of the residential school legacy, as well as all Canadians, can come together to heal, do ceremony, reflect, talk, or mediate, and to better understand the legacy of the residential school system and move forward in a positive way. Tonight, we'll hear about how to develop your own healing forest in the spirit of reconciliation and how to present those ideas to landowners for deeper discussion. All resources needed for the healing forest come from the existing community, provincial, or federal programs devoted to reconciliation. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Jan Andrews, who will recognize the ground beneath her feet. Take it away, Jan.
Thanks, Mike. Here in the Ottawa area, we live on unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquins, who lived along the shores of the Ottawa River for thousands of years. They are the original true stewards of this land. We still have much to do to repair our damaged relationships with our Indigenous neighbors, to earn their trust, friendship, and respect after many, many years of colonial violence. Today, I am grateful for all our kin on this land. With open hearts and open minds, may we all learn and grow. Now I'll ask Claire to introduce this evening's speakers.
And what an honor to present to you the initiators of the National Healing Forests Initiative, Patricia Sturbies and Peter Kroll. Patricia is a member of the Cowessess First Nation that's in the Qu'Appelle Valley in Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory. She was born and raised in Ontario and came from Thunder Bay to Ottawa about 30 years ago for a sports competition. She picked Ottawa as her home because of its trees and rivers. After obtaining her Master of Laws degree, she practiced for a short while. But over time, Patricia became an Indigenous Relations Specialist. Currently, she is Director of Indigenous Relations in the nuclear science sector, where she's in the process of building an Indigenous Directorate and a reconciliation strategy. Everything she does includes an Indigenous and a non-Indigenous relations element. This demanding position leaves her little time for community activism, though she is connected to the Indigenous community and is currently applying herself to learning her native language, Saulteaux. When asked, Patricia stated that one of her great joys is being on her bicycle and feeling the wind in her face. A close second is walking one-on-one with friends, as personal relationships and friendships are very important to her. A retired geologist, Peter Kroll, worked in international development, in CEDA actually, for a good part of his career, where he combined his scientific knowledge with his urge to make the world a better place to live in. In his own words, Peter is happiest in the bush. He is a hiker, skier, canoeist, and gardener. Currently, he focuses his efforts in facilitating the establishment of a relationship with the land by volunteering with NGOs that are dealing with the environment. For example, he is geologist in residence in a community on Fogo Island, where he gives talks and guided explorations a few times a year. The National Healing Forest Initiative is a natural extension of his commitment to the land and his vision of its healing powers. Miigwech, Patricia, and Peter for accepting to speak today. I now pass the feather to you.
I'm unmuting myself and I have to share my screen. I share my screen first. What order do I do this in? Well, can you see the screen? Or the PowerPoint, I should say?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. Wow. Well, thank you, Michael, for the introduction to the Earth Speaks event, and thank you, Jan, for that lovely land acknowledgement. There is a lot. There's a lot of history, to the lands that we're on right now, and Claire, thank you so much for those personal introductions to Peter and I. That's very kind. And so thank you everyone who's on this Zoom call this evening to listen to Peter and I talk about the National Healing Forest Initiative. And I'm the one who's operating the slides tonight, so it's a little bit awkward. I'm like waiting for the slide to change. That's me. So here's Peter and I, and so our slide, what motivates us. And for me, it's because my mom, my aunts and uncles, other friends that went to residential school over the years, and that's one of the motivations. People had different experiences when they're at residential school. Some were better than others, and also, the motivation for doing this project with Peter is also, finding a way to bring Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians together, and helping people to understand each other. And the more effort that we make as individuals to reach out to each other and learn about each other, the better our understanding, and that kind of all the reconciliation can happen that way. Peter, what motivates you?
Thanks, Patricia. What motivates me? Well, being a geologist, I worked many years in the bush with a lot of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. They would be my partners in the bush, people I would hire to help with the surveys, and I'd work very closely with chief and councils across the country. And so I spent a lot of time in the bush and talking to chiefs and councils and community members about their issues. And in those conversations, things like the residential school legacy do pop up, because it is that issue is pervasive in every community across the country. And so now, being retired but still active on a bunch of things, this project that Patricia and I developed together is, I guess, my personal effort to try to make something that was horrible a bit better in this country. And having places to gather to talk about these difficult subjects is our vision for reconciliation.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's you've got Peter, the non-Indigenous guy, and myself as the Indigenous woman. We came together, and we start reconciliation, just him and I, just starting this project together. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to work with Peter on this. And this is a picture of the Marivale Residential School in Saskatchewan. It was actually part of houses. And one of my cousins talks about her, like she's one of the later ones, these schools closed in '96. She talks about being in residential school, and her dad, my uncle, would stand, out on the road or in the field, and she would come to the window and and he would wave to her and wish her good night every night. And so it's just kind of sad because theoretically they could have just gone home, but that wasn't the way that the school was run. So I'm going to give you a brief history, like the briefest history of residential school, a little bit of general history, and around the Indian policy in Canada, and what was the province of Canada, and then talk a little bit about how Peter and I met and started this project, and then I'll pass it on to Peter, who will talk to us about the different projects that have been created by some awesome people across Canada. So before residential schools, there were mission schools in the 1600s and the 1800s, and these were run by different religious orders, and they taught kids English and how to read the Bible and how to become good Christians. And with the passing of the new British North America Act, or the Constitution Act of 1867, the government took, that created Canada, the country, and not the province of Canada. The federal government then took responsibility over Indians and lands reserved for Indians. And later, then they developed the Indian Act of 1876. And it evolved a little bit from one of the earlier acts in 1857 called the Gradual Civilization Act. So the federal government, with some persistence by some of the settlers, the folks who came over to live in Canada and to settle here, they really wanted to fix this Indian problem, and let's get them civilized and get them speaking our language and wearing the same clothes as us and living the way that we do. And so they had the Gradual Civilization Act of 1857, one of the earliest assimilationist pieces of legislation. And then from there was the Gradual Enfranchisement Act, because the Civilization Act wasn't working fast enough. So they thought, well, if we get the Indians to enfranchise, meaning you give up your Indianness, and I don't know, they give you a button. I don't know what they give you. But if you give up your Indian status, then you can become maybe a voting member of society. And that process, the Enfranchisement Act, also established the elective band council system. So the government was starting to interfere in the way that Indigenous people held their elections. And that still remains in the Indian Act today. So both the Gradual Civilization Act and the Gradual Enfranchisement Act were folded into the Indian Act of 1876. And that gave the Department of Indian Affairs these powers over the lives of Indigenous people, the governance structures, cultural practices, and also education. And the big goal was to remove children from their culture and family influence. So, part of the Indian Act, it made it mandatory, right, for kids to go to residential school. And so that if kids were just going to school during the day and then they go home, they'd still be influenced by the family, still speaking their language, still learning and practicing their culture. And the federal government didn't want that. So the residential school objectives really was about assimilation, taking on Western values and Christianity, and to end the Indian problem, which is how some settlers saw it. And, Prime Minister, then Sir John A. Macdonald, also saw it this way when he stated that the objective of residential schools was to take the Indian out of the child. And that extended to the churches as well. And we've got Bishop Condé in 1875 saying we instill in them a pronounced distaste. So they just wanted to, make the Indian children feel like their culture was bad. Let's teach them in a way that they're embarrassed by who they are, and then they want to just become, more like a settler as opposed to practicing their own culture. So just a small point, a big point. The first school opened in 1828, and the last one closed in 1997, and that was the Kivalliq Hall in Rankin Inlet in Nunavut. So, you know, we've got this really tough, dark history of Canada, and it's things you don't think. You know, this is Canada. It's hard to believe sometimes, you know, because we have this. There's such this beautiful perception of what Canada is, but we also have you know, our dark history and our dark moments and racism, misunderstandings across our country as well. But sometimes good things happen, and this is where Peter and I met at the Reconciliation Walk in May of 2015. It was just prior to the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and its 94 calls to action. If you've never read the 94 calls to action, it's a really great thing. It helps you to get a really good understanding about some of the issues and concerns of Indigenous people in 94 paragraphs. And if anyone listens to CBC, Tom Allen talks about, you know, he gives one call to action every day, somewhere around, I don't know, 2:30 or something like that. So this is where Peter and I met. I can't remember what's on the next slide. Oop. We were basically, Peter and I were strangers. We were walking near each other, and eventually we were just kind of walking alongside each other. And Peter, you know, was kind of pondering what you know, what can be done about reconciliation in Canada. How do we make it a better place? How do we help people heal? And you know, there's a brief discussion about you know, Japanese forest bathing, and I think some Korea as well. And so, you know, we decided really at that moment, well, let's get together. I said, I'll help. We can do this together. And so we did. I think we met the next weekend. We started drafting up ideas about what a healing forest could look like. Murray Sinclair, he was the commission chair, then senator, and he is now at Queen's University. He said reconciliation is not an Indigenous problem, it's a Canadian one, it's all of us. And so that's a really great thing to keep in mind, you know. We're all treaty people. It's not just Indigenous people who are treaty people. It's not just Indigenous people that, you know, want things to get better. I think it's all of us that we need to think about all the good things that we can do to better understand each other. So what is a healing forest? Well, it's any outdoor green space for reconciliation and building community. And you know, as you know, Peter often says, and I'm picking up on that thought as well. You know, it's so much easier to talk in an open outdoor space than it is always in these more formal settler created concrete buildings. And you know, when you're walking with a friend through a forest or you're sitting on the grass, it's just this more relaxed place to talk about hard subjects. And so that's what these green spaces are about. It's about conciliation, talking about the history, talking about perspectives, and really getting to know each other. So planning and partnership in developing a healing forest takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of levels of people, I think. And you know, it takes communities. In those communities are all these wonderful people. It's a grassroots movement. Peter and I don't tell you it's got to look like this, and this is the plan of, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Although generally we give you some kind of guidance just to help you out. And it's really you as individuals. You know, what is your goal? Who would you partner with? You know, we all have different levels of understanding about Indigenous people and even about our surrounding community. So it's a great way to meet the people in your own kind of nearby community, as well as Indigenous communities on whose traditional territory your healing forest would be created. So there, it's really important to have that Indigenous, non-Indigenous partnership. That's where reconciliation happens, and that understanding. So some of the core steps to creating a healing forest include something that we're doing now. We're getting together, we're assembling, we're talking about something that we're all interested in. So you get a group of like-minded, caring people. And it doesn't have to be a big bunch of people. It could be 4 people, it could be 10 people, whatever whoever wants to be most active. And there again, that partnership between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities is really important. And you just meet as many times as you need to. You start sharing ideas, writing it down, storyboarding, and people often come to these things with, "Hey, I've got an idea. I think it could be there, and that there's a green space, like there's a church up the street from me. They had like a 20 by 40 space or so, and let's do it there." Somebody else might have another spot, but together you narrow down where your healing forest can be, and you meet other like-minded people, and you find this wonderful space that's kind of nurturing, I think, as I kind of envision healing forests. It could be part of an existing park, or could be a church area. It could be a private space, and Peter's going to talk about the different healing forests in all of these different areas. So the other thing, in addition to your small group, gather other folks around you, other people from the community, kind of invite them in, or let them know that this healing forest is being created. And then, once you get it established, you can have other community members come in and help to plant trees, or plant a tree, or plant traditional medicines like tobacco, or sage, or sweetgrass, or something. And then hold a ceremony, dedicate the space for the good things that it's going to do. And then we do have signage, graphics that we can provide to you if you wanted to create a sign to designate your healing forest. And people will recognize that sign as part of the healing forest chain or necklace, or I don't know the other names that we set out there, but just a connection, a real network of community like-minded people. So healing forests can be any outdoor gathering space, and you could have an elder do a teaching. People could just go around a circle and share. Walking trails, it can include tree planting, or, as I mentioned, use of sacred medicines, garden memorials with names. My favorite is a children's honoring park, like a playground almost, and that's to recognize the children who were lost to residential school. And there's really a lot of, every single healing forest so far is so different, and Peter's going to talk to us about those right about now. Peter.
Thanks, Patricia. That was great. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. And I know there's some other community associations joining tonight, and that's great that the word is getting out through this broadcast that has been set up by First Unitarian Church of Ottawa. I think that's really generous. So the very first healing forest was in Edmonton, Alberta, quite modest in its approach, but very powerful. And the social activist person who designed this just elected to have students and people hang messages of healing and reconciliation along this beautiful path along this river in Edmonton. The city of Edmonton is going to dedicate funds for a more permanent kind of healing forest, and that's in the works now. Yeah. Now, just outside of Ottawa is a really lovely healing forest. There's 10 in the country, and this was probably about the third or fourth to be developed. It was developed through an organization in Perth called The Table, which is a socially active group that looks after vulnerable people and hunger in the Perth area. And they formed a small committee, backwards a bit Patricia. They formed a committee and reached out to the Algonquins, and this was inaugurated about 2 or 3 years ago now. It's extremely beautiful area by the river, and I was out there on the National Truth and Reconciliation Day, September 30th, just last fall, and 200 people came to participate in the ceremony and hear the stories about residential schools. A more elaborate designed space is here, is, as you see in front of you, is in Winnipeg at St. John's Park. It's a municipal park, and the city council was so supportive of this idea that was presented to them by a group of Indigenous peoples and actually a university professor and her team, that the city elected to generate quite a significant amount of funds to hire a landscape architect to create this more manufactured space. And it is really coming along quite well. And there's an image of what that space looks like. And students can gather there and learn about residential school issues. One thing to remember is that these healing forest spaces are not exclusionary. If it's in a municipal park, then by all means, people can still do what you do in a municipal park. You can read a book, go for a hike, walk your dog. But on special days, these healing forest spaces are used for reconciliation events. And a healing forest can happen on private land. When the gentleman on the left, Terry Lukes, heard of the healing forest idea, he was so excited about that he said, I want to have this on my land. And so he approached his First Nation community and some of his friends and established a healing forest on his own private acreage. And there are gatherings there, and you can see Patricia in the slide on the right. On the inauguration day, I couldn't go, but Patricia went. And so Terry's very active in reconciliation in Fitch Bay, Quebec, and he brings people to his land on a regular basis to talk about forests and reconciliation. The latest healing forest is at Riverside Public School in Cape Breton. That school elected to develop a knowledge keeper's path, they call it. It's a 2-kilometer trail that they were developing that has teaching points along the trail. And just as they were developing that trail, they heard about the healing forest and they said, we need to have a healing forest space in the middle of that trail. So you can see the student reading a book there on the bench, and during that walk with the elders to establish a healing forest space, he saw this birch tree growing out of the granite boulders, and he said, that's a sign for us, and that's where they put the healing forest. So people can gather there, students can gather there and learn about reconciliation. All communities can gather there with elders and with teachers to learn about reconciliation and to bring people closer together on this challenging subject.
Just add a note there, Peter. One of the things I love about this Riverside Public School project is that all of the kids were involved. They were involved in helping to set up this outdoor learning space. And just the fact that the kids were there, they were learning all along, along the way through a Mi'kmaq elder. So I really appreciate that, any of the projects that are done at the schools and that include the little kids.
And just on that, just one point, the elder that was principal to the development of that healing forest with the school, his name is Stephen Augustine, and he was he curated the Eastern Indigenous Peoples collection at the Museum of History, but he's now teaching at Cape Breton University. So progress to date. Well, as I said, there's 10 healing forests. There's a thesis being done on a healing forest by a student at Dalhousie University. The Royal Canadian Geographic Society was so excited by the healing forest idea that they developed a teaching module that is now available to all schools across the country. And that teaching module uses the healing forest as a foundation to talk about reconciliation And very, very recently, the David Suzuki Foundation has partnered with us to provide funds directly to communities and individuals who are developing healing forest. And so in the first year of the partnership, 10 communities will receive, I believe it is $2,000 as sort of a,
up to 2,000, yeah.
yeah, up to 2,000 as a seed grant to help a community get another healing forest going.
That was super exciting. I think that was that only last weekend? Or is it the
That was
weekend?
only last weekend.
Jeez. Oh,
COVID times.
yeah.
And as Patricia said just a few moments ago, all the healing forests generally elect to put this logo on their healing forest, on a plaque or on a sign or something. And we had this designed by Marcoon Design, a firm in Ottawa here. And we just think it's the most beautiful thing. It shows trees and leaves. There's the shapes of teardrops there. There's a shape of a mother cradling her young child, her children in the middle. At the left and right are young Aboriginal kids, sort of like in the roots of the trees, the next generation, and honoring the generation that passed as well, that were lost in the residential schools. And actually someone during a presentation a couple of weeks ago said, this actually looks like a turtle looking straight on. Like if you're on the ground looking at a turtle, you're looking into the nose and the two eyes of a turtle. And it's a kind of a nice nod to Turtle Island. So we never really saw that, but it's.
No, it was like they thought the kids were like, that was the, I don't know, what are they called? Paws, feet?
I guess paws.
The turtle. And then the round top, you know, looked like the turtle shell. And I kind of think the middle one is the head.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was such a, yeah, it was really, really neat to kind of have that realization that, yeah, that could also be a turtle. So yeah, Turtle Island.
Yeah. So Patricia's talked about this a little bit. The way that a healing forest is created is so simple, and sometimes people think, well, how could this be this simplicity? Well, it's just this. Patricia and I came up with the idea of developing green spaces across Canada to where people can gather for reconciliation, and you've seen some examples of those. But we don't tell communities how to do this. We just invite people to reach out to the Indigenous community where the healing forest is going to be created and form a meaningful and intentional partnership with that group. So if anybody on the call wanted to develop a healing forest in the Ottawa area, then you'd be forming a relationship with someone from the Algonquin community and make that a meaningful relationship, because that's the start of reconciliation. But you create the actual healing forest. There's funding now from the David Suzuki Foundation. The federal government's got funding, provinces have funding, even the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg has funding for these things.
Yeah.
And we invite people to share news about your progress so we can put it on our website to continue growing this necklace of reconciliation spots across the country.
I think that's probably the most exciting part, is the growing number of healing forests and becoming this real community across Canada. I think that in itself is a beautiful thing.
So we have an invitation to you. Is if you like what you're hearing and you like what you've seen and you read on our website, then you are welcome and invited to create another healing forest as you wish. If there are teachers on the call, you can develop them on the school grounds as they've done in Cape Breton. And there's other schools in the Toronto area that are developing healing forests right now. Churches are developing healing forests. It's wherever there's land, that's a possibility for a healing forest. And as an elder said to us a couple of years ago, anybody that's doing anything to protect the land and put the sacredness back into the land and honor the land, that's the first step towards reconciliation. And at the same time, if you're developing these spaces, you're certainly connecting people to nature, again, through the teachings that elders offer. If you're planting trees or protecting forests, that's a climate change mitigation, and certainly bringing two ways of knowing together. The Indigenous way of knowing and the sort of Western or European way of knowing is a very strong transformational exercise to build community in a positive way. And this is our last slide. And that's our website. Sorry?
The davidsuzuki.org. I guess, yeah, you could look there also for the funding. Okay?
Yeah, at the davidsuzuki.org Healing Forest there. That's where you'll get information on how the David Suzuki Foundation will assist you in getting funding for your own efforts to develop a healing forest. And if you have any questions or emails you want to send to us, there's our email right there. And one thing I want to emphasize too that hasn't come out in the talk is that Patricia and I are not an NGO. We're not organized in any formal way at all. We are two people working closely together as friends from two different cultures who have a website, an idea, and a vision, and we share it with people that want to hear from us. But we don't have an office, or we don't have any formal papers or legal documents, just an idea, a website, and a vision.
And now
and
money.
friendship.
Yeah,
And a bit of money from the David
some money now. So David Suzuki, this David Suzuki Foundation is currently developing the application forms, and I can't remember the date, but they're not quite ready yet. So you can check it out, just keep following it, and you know, I think it'll probably be within 2 weeks or so that they'll be all ready to accept, send, you know, have people download the application, fill it in, and submit it. And you don't have to have the whole idea finished. Like, who am I going to partner with? I don't know yet. Where are we going to do it? I don't know yet. Get a small group together, and start, you know, writing down what your vision can be. And so David Suzuki Foundation is not looking for the perfect application, but looking at, you know, different creative ways that people will develop the healing forest, and yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Follow that website. It'll be on ours as well.
Yeah, it's just like Patricia and I during this conversation just now, we've kind of told you how to make an omelet, but we don't make the omelet for you. You've got to make the omelet yourself.
We gave you one egg.
Well, that's great. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Very interesting. As Margaret mentioned once in the chat, if you have questions, please put them there now. And I'll moderate the questions up till around 8 o'clock. I had kind of a first.
Mike, may I say something? I was wondering if Patricia could quit sharing her screen, and then we'd be able to see.
Yeah, I was just about to do that.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
good.
Are we done?
That's
Yeah.
excellent. Yes.
Okay, I always forget these pretty simple things. So, thank you. Just an interest in forests and how it could relate to a healing forest. We sometimes have discussion on how native tree species, for example, in Eastern Ontario, as they were before settlers came, are not very prevalent anymore. And is getting native tree species ever a consideration in having a healing forest?
It is. I think there were in Scotchford or Abequate First Nation on the East Coast. They looked at native species of trees, and they planted, I don't know how many trees they planted, but they planted quite a few for their healing forest.
And the school was involved. A lot of kids were involved in that project, and actually that healing forest was initiated by two non-Indigenous university students who approached the community with the idea, formed a relationship. They went to powwows, they took their time, they learned about the community, and healing forest was born.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like in many ways you're flexible, but there's guidepost ideas that that help enhance the whole concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The most important thing about this, it's really kind of a, I don't know, I can't find the right word for it, but it's a sensitive issue, is that we're talking about residential school. We're not talking about a water park or a theme park. We're talking about residential school issues here, and this can be a triggering discussion for many people. Even the mention of residential schools can be triggering. So the formation of a respectful, meaningful, and intentional relationship with the First Nation community is absolutely pivotal to showing that the non-Indigenous community is sincere, and this is not a "we're here to help you" kind of thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's been done before, and it doesn't work very well.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned pretty well all of these projects start with some contact with local Indigenous people. How would you, what's the approach to making contact with them then, with an Indigenous group in your area? If that's the approach, maybe I guess in some cases, or in many cases, Indigenous people are involved right from the beginning. So that might be easier, kind of a question.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we found so far, out of these 10 healing forests, it's been the non-Indigenous individual or community group that has gone to the First Nation. So I'm trying to encourage Indigenous communities to reach out to their cities and municipalities and getting something kickstarted. So I actually challenged Saskatoon and Regina folks to to kind of fight each other, to start their healing forest in either one of those cities. Who's going to do it first? But I think, just like you would contact anyone else, you just pick up the phone. And in this area of Ottawa, it would be the Algonquin people. So if you call a community like the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan, for example, who are not too far from here, from Ottawa, they have a consultation person. And so wherever you are across the country, pick up the phone and maybe, say, do you have a consultation person or an engagement person or someone who's involved with projects? And then you can have that conversation with that individual. You can also, try to get in touch with a counselor, maybe somebody who's got the social portfolio or health, and start a conversation with them. The idea that you have and that you're just starting this idea and you'd be interested in talking with them further, and then start to share ideas and see if they want to partner on the project.
Mm-hmm.
And also too, every public office, every city councillor and mayor, every MPP, every MP has got Indigenous, Métis, or Inuit contacts, because they need to have those contacts for their engagement and policy advice requirements. So you can reach out to your elected officials for help. That's what they're there for. You can reach out to the clergy, because many churches have reconciliation committees already established with First Nation membership. So there's that approach. Schools have got, usually school boards have got Indigenous representation or committees that people go to for advice on curriculum and teachings and this sort of thing. So there's a wide array of resources out there in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So just to know,
Friendship centers.
Yeah, you are still recording. I don't know if you still wanted to be recording.
We usually, for the formal questions, we usually keep recording up to 8 o'clock.
Oh, that's fine.
Is it fine? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
I thought that you'd wanted to. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What other questions do you have for us?
Yeah, 8 o'clock, we knock the recording off and then it's just chit chat. I don't moderate anymore. So there. So, yeah. There's a question about kind of maintaining a site if it's, say, on a city park, for example, and what the experience might be with that. And maybe it relates to just kind of ongoing, ongoing care and oversight and support for Healing Forest when it gets located. Any things that you could share about that line of consideration?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's a couple of parks already. Well, you saw the one in Perth, you saw the one in Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I think it's got a little bit more hands-on from there's a community or organization that has, they're like caretakers of the Winnipeg Healing Forest. And they'll have a fire pit. And if you want to use that fire pit or you want to do some kind of ceremony or something, they'll bring it out for you and then take it back and store it again. And I think in most cases, the city is, very much involved and engaged in it. So city staff will help with the maintenance of the grass and such around the park.
Mm-hmm.
We, Patricia and I actually went to the city council meeting when the Healing Forest for Perth was approved by city council. The community made their presentation, and the mayor was actually in tears. He was so moved by the presentation and the idea, and he said, without hesitation, the Perth will support this project, and so there is regular funding being provided by the Perth city to maintain the area as it would in a park, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's good. You got a mayor to just decree it. No vote even.
Yeah. Oh, it was unanimous. It was unanimous.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Well, I imagine, taking care of a healing forest, it would be a labor of love. I could imagine that, finding people to keep taking care of it would not be hard at all. I mean,
well, this is Michael. This is the point of the whole thing. Like, this is not a one-off kind of thing where you make you create a healing forest and go, okay, that's done.
Mm-hmm.
Reconciliation is done, right? No. It like as soon as the group gets together to talk about this, that's the beginning steps of the reconciliation. Even before the healing forest is developed, it's getting these two cultures talking together. Right. Exploring issues. That is a very pivotal step in reconciliation. Then you develop the park or the space. That's great. But the use and maintenance and honoring of that space is for perpetuity.
Yeah, sure.
And so,
by the community.
Like the church that's up the street from me. I mean, they would have been cutting the grass on that, that 20 by 40 strip anyways. Then they planted 2 trees, 2 big giant rocks were put in. And so they'll use the rocks, for teaching and for the children. So when they found the unmarked graves in Kamloops, it initiated this project with the children in the church, and they drew, little messages or images on little stones, and they put it on top of the big rocks. And so, they use the space. They planted tobacco, I can't remember the species of the tree, but important species of tree as well. And so these spaces are well used by the communities who created them.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here. Maybe somebody is thinking of a place that isn't terribly treed yet, so wondering what to do about that. So maybe it's all it is so far is the field. They were mowing it last spring. What do we do? So yeah.
Well,
size of the trees or stuff like that.
Let me tell you a story.
Pieces of trees, right?
I think that's a great. If it's a vacant field, then and it's got some historic and cultural significance to the First Nation,
Mhm.
perhaps that is an ideal place for a healing forest. I'll give you an example of the healing forest space that's being developed in Gibsons, BC right now. And it's kind of like a municipal land, parkish, conservation area. And when they actually started the healing forest space, they actually found artifacts. They had to bring in an archaeologist to stop the creation of the healing forest. It's still being developed, but they had to do a dig to see what was there. So it proved that space, which is now going to be healing forest, was actually used by the First Nations. I forget the community. It might have been Squamish tribe. Used that space for hundreds of years. So that vacant field, could be a significant space to the Algonquins.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. There's a question. I'm starting to get more questions now. So pardon me, I got to get caught up here. Just thoughts about really small spaces. And I mean, in downtowns in Canada, there might not be much space in lots of areas. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I gave the example of the 20, it's around 20 by 40 feet. And because they own the land, they could put in trees. But if you can't put in trees, they don't want you to plant trees, you can still, add a rock, you can have garden spaces. So Peter and I have been talking to a real garden activist in Toronto, and they've got I don't know, 3 or 4 gardens that they're designating healing forests. They're doing that ceremony or event at the end of midsummer, August 9th. And so yeah, they could be gardens.
Mhm.
Even if they're not big enough to put a tree or a big rock, you can put a green space, put a garden in.
Yeah.
If people want to go to see the space that Patricia is talking about, it's All Saints Anglican Church, right across from Mountain Equipment Co-op.
Lululemon, and right at the corner of around Churchill and Richmond Road.
And
Okay.
it's a small space, but it's a powerful space because that's where people gather to have these conversations.
For sure. Somebody's even bribing me with a smiley face in their question, so I better, and I'm a sucker for that. Peter referred to a necklace of healing forests across the country. Do you have any, Patricia and Peter, do you have any outdoor areas where you would like to see the necklace grow?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mentioned Saskatchewan, Regina, and Saskatoon. They have this rivalry. And that's where my First Nation is, in Saskatchewan in the Capel Valley. And I would love to see one there. I'd love to see one started there, either city or anywhere in between, anywhere around the province. I would love to see it there, and also in the north. More north, because we've got east and west and somewhere in between, but we haven't yet connected with folks from the north.
Right. So there's a couple questions about just getting a recorded copy. That'll be on FirstU website in a few days. So just go to the FirstU website, the landing page, through the front door, and you'll be able to come to a drop down, which will have this recording on it. Are there any issues you've had with? You must have had a little bit of this, but with some inappropriate use, and what do you do to discourage it? And I guess it's kind of just keep on a positive train, but just with that.
Somebody had mentioned something about smoking, but I don't know if that was our healing forest or another space. Sometimes people can smoke and flick their cigarettes or something. There was some damage done to the Winnipeg healing forest. Some of the stone was damaged, that they had like they've got a stone medicine wheel. So that was damaged and they will have to repair it. As much as you can, what I find, and just reading studies and such, that one of the ways that you help community members, people within a city center, for example, how to slow down at least people from damaging things is to include them. So, as much as possible, as Peter mentioned, make the space inclusive, invite as much of the community in as you can, and keep it open and welcoming. And people tend to, care for spaces where they're welcome. And they can have it as their own as well.
Yeah. It's just, comparison might be a small street with cafes out on the sidewalk and they're welcoming, and you don't often associate that with, people not being on their best behavior. It's usually a good spot. So, yeah, for sure. We're almost at 8 o'clock, and I'd like to just make sure all the wonderful people who helped pull this together know they've done a great job this evening, the Zoom hosts, and Claire and Jen for helping do the introductions, and of course, Patricia and Peter yourselves. It was a great talk, really, really inspiring thing that you're on to promoting all over Canada, and something I think really helps to bring out the best in us. So yeah, wonderful. And thanks again. Great talk on a wonderful early spring evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get the invite.
So, and to some of the people again, there are getting to be a lot of questions at the end, so it's open forum now. We'll assume